All right, today we have an anonymous guest here that's going to expose the corruption within the Texas state government. Um, what departments did you actually work for?
I work for the Department of Human Services doing welfare, food stamps, Medicaid, things of that nature, just qualifying people, um, determining their eligibility. I eventually ended up in a supervisory position over people that determined eligibility. I did that for roughly 5 years or so, and then I switched over to the Commerce Department, Department of Commerce, the state of Texas, doing workforce training, which eventually got folded into the Workforce Commission, the unemployment people. But I in that job, I would have to travel. I would travel all over the state, basically being the eyes and the ears of the state administration, overseeing how the funds were being spent in these local districts, local cities, local counties. After that, I worked for the Commission on Drug and Alcohol Abuse, basically just analyzing data, and I did that for the rest of my career. Eventually, I ended up at the Workers' Compensation Commission, doing the same thing. I would use a tool called SAS, and a language, called SQL to query databases and basically analyze data. And I did that for over 20 years. So that's basically the history of my career. It wasn't quite 30 years. I think I did 27 total for the state of Texas, but over 20 of it was spent doing data analytics, computer programming, data analytics.
What was the data actually even being used for, and who was using it, and why was it important?
Ostensibly, it was being used to help improve the administration of the programs, whatever it was, whether it was, you know, eligibility for food stamps and Medicaid and all of that, or whether it was job training, how to improve job training, or how to help treat addicts better, or how to deliver workers' compensation better. That ostensibly that was what it was, but it really wasn't. What it ended up being was agenda driven. You would have members of the Texas House and Senate that wanted to pass bills because they would be approached by people, private interests in the community that would want their House rep or their Senate member to pass bills that would aid them in the industry, whether it was drug addiction or drug treatment or workers training, but whatever. They would approach them and they want a bill, and so they need data. And so these House reps and the Senate members would approach the administration in these departments and say, I need some data that says this so we can get this bill passed. I can bring this data before the whole House, and I can bring this data before the whole Senate, and I can get my bill passed, and then therefore I'll get my campaign funded by these outside interests. And so, the administration in these departments would approach me because I was the data analyst, and they would say, okay, I need you to run this query in the database, but I need it to say this because that's what this House rep or this member of the Senate wants. And I would say, well, I'd run the numbers. I say the numbers don't prove that point. Just the raw numbers. I wasn't trying to manipulate anything. And they would be like, no, this will not work. It's not. I can't present this to the House rep or the Senate member because it's not proving their point. They won't be able to get their bill passed, and they won't be able to get this special interest money. And so they would say, why don't you not include this data over here and maybe include this other data over there, exclude this, include that. And I'm like, you do realize that's, you're basically lying because that's not really what the data says. And they're like, they didn't care. And, I needed a job. So I went ahead and, run the numbers the way they wanted them. And with not even, sometimes not even a footnote. Sometimes they would footnote it, in the small print down at the bottom of the chart or whatever. They'd have a footnote that says what was included and what was excluded, but nobody ever reads that anyway. But other times they just wouldn't even footnote anything. And I was like, okay. So basically, it was just a big lie to either promote somebody's career that was above me or get somebody in the House, the Texas House or the Texas Senate, data that they could use to get their bill pushed through so they could get special interest money, campaign finance.
And it was also about funding, right? Gathering funding as well for the department that you worked for.
Yeah, funding for the agency. That was also a big concern of the higher-ups in administration. They needed to be able to approach the House and the Senate and say...
Justify them needing more money.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, all agencies always want more money. And so to get more money, they have to paint a very dire picture. And, something that...
And you were the one that was painting the picture.
Yeah, painting the dire picture with the data. So they needed to come off looking like, oh my God, drug addiction's this, or, workers' comp is that, and we need more money because things are so awful. And so, yeah, it was all a lie. It was all a lie. But yet I did it. I'm guilty of it. I did it. I got raises for it, too. I got rewarded handsomely for providing them the data that they wanted in the way that they wanted it. And it was all a lie. And it was printed in the newspapers. It was reported in the news. It was, sold to the legislature. So it was a lie, but I got rewarded handsomely for it, which, I'm not too proud of, but I was a good programmer. I can say that, but did I do any really meaningful work? No.
Yes. And so did you also want to talk about at the time in your career where you were actually traveling and the corruption that happens along the Texas-Mexico border?
Yeah, at a certain point when I was doing workforce training in the late 90s, I had regions around Texas that I was responsible for. And basically, I was a representative from the state government. I worked in Austin, so I was like, kind of like at the top of the administration.
Well, the capital of Texas.
Yeah,
yes.
The capital of Texas, yes. So the capital of Texas, that's where all the money comes from. And they send all this money out to these outlying regions. And one of my regions was the southern border. And so I'd, have to go down there 2 or 3 times a year and just kind of see what's going on, see if they're spending the money and not wasting it, making sure everything's running the way it should run. I basically audit. I would audit them. And they knew this. They knew I was coming. It was all arranged, and I'd go down there in a certain week, and I'd stay there about a week. And they would do the dog and pony and show me around their facilities and how they administer the program that we wanted them to administer, which was training people for jobs. And they knew that I was an auditor, so they would approach me and, and basically wink, wink, nod, nod. If, what do you want? You're down here. We want you to take a good report back to Austin about us. We don't want you taking a bad report, because then it might make it to where, they would lose money. They would lose funding if I took back a bad report. So they wanted me to take back a good report really badly. And so they would ask, and they would say, what do you want? You want girls? You want drugs? You want liquor? What do you want? You want it all? We'll give it whatever you want. And, basically trying to ply me with drugs, alcohol, and women. So I would go back and go, yeah, those guys are great. They do a great job. Don't mess with them. Nothing to see here. I didn't do it. I didn't go for it. I didn't take the bait. But
you drank with them.
Well, I drank with them. Yeah, I drank with them. But I didn't take the bait on the girls and the drugs. They wanted me to, because then they'd have that to hang over my head. Is really what it was. It was a trap. Because if I would have taken the bait, then they could have said, you take back a bad report, and we're going to tell your boss about your dirty doings. And I knew it. I knew that's exactly what they were trying to do. They needed something to hang over my head. So I didn't take that bait. But yeah, they tried. And it was just corrupt. I exposed them for what they were, and, they got in a little trouble and had to clean up their act a little bit. But they definitely tried to play that card. and it was just funny. And to them, it was nothing. That's just the way everything works down there. That's the way everything works. It's all corrupt. So, I don't know what to say. I did that for 3 years, and I couldn't do it anymore. And that's when I switched over to the Commission on Alcohol and Drug Abuse, which is kind of ironic because I'm an alcoholic, but that's okay.
Yeah, nobody knew.
Nobody knew. But yeah, so I had to get away from it because it was too corrupt.
Yes. And speaking of that, did you want to talk about any of the findings that you found in the alcohol and drug abuse?
No, it's fine. They wanted to avoid racial, and gender, race and gender.
So it was even going on back then.
Yeah, it was starting up. It's not anywhere near the level that it is today. But they wanted to avoid race and gender in analysis, because there were definite correlations between which types of drugs that women prefer and which types of drugs that men prefer. There were definite preferences among the races for drugs. One race would prefer this drug, another race would prefer that drug.
Did you want to get into all of that, or?
No. I mean, I can tell you what I found that they didn't want me to report.
Oh, yeah. That would be good.
Yeah, what I found that they didn't want reported. The Hispanics largely preferred heroin. The blacks largely preferred cocaine. Whites largely preferred alcohol.
And does that cocaine include crack?
Yes, crack and just regular powder.
Yes.
But these things were very apparent in the data. I mean, they're just right there, right out there for you to just grab up. Just do a crosstab. Gender by drug, drug of choice. Gender by drug of choice, and then come up with a graph. Or race by drug of choice, and you could see it. It was clearly apparent, but they didn't want any of that reported. So that was all left out. So that's just one example. Other things that I found were gross mismanagement of taxpayer funds. You could go in there and see in the data that administration was just squandering funds and getting nothing, no results, no positive results for the money that was being spent, and they didn't want that reported either. And so to cover it up, that's where you started doing all of these, including variables and excluding variables, so they could hide the fact that they were wasting, just squandering taxpayer money. They couldn't report that to the legislature, because then the legislature would yank their grants or whatever funding stream that they had. I had to do some gymnastics through coding to hide the fact that they were squandering taxpayer money. So there were some inconvenient truths about gender and race that they didn't want out there, and there were also some inconvenient truths about their gross mismanagement. Giving each other bonuses and raises the whole time, not really spending the taxpayers' money effectively and efficiently, where you'd get positive results for the American citizen or the citizen of Texas. And all the while I knew when they told me exactly what to include and what to exclude, I go, okay, I see where you're going with this. And they were like, yes, just do it. And I do it and I get a raise. So yeah, I did that for 27 years. So
basically, the Texas government is corrupt, and they were paying you to lie in order to get taxpayers' money, and then just misuse it.
That and the fact that special interests that were funding Texas House Representatives elections and Senate elections, they needed data to help prop those guys up too. It's you scratch my back, I scratch yours. The Senate and the House people would come to the high up in administration and say, we'll give you this much money, but I also need your help in my election so I can get this bill passed so these people will fund my campaign. so I can get reelected. And so that was, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, and that went on and on and on every election cycle. The departments got funded, House reps and senators got reelected, and all the statistics were hollow. They weren't real. They painted a picture that was not reality. And it just, I guess it's about as simply as I can put it.
And some people would say that your experience would be anecdotal or whatever, and it's like, oh, well, that's just one corrupt department. Would you say that you could trust statistics from other departments?
No, it was rampant. It was rampant throughout every department, and there's dozens and dozens of departments, and the state, it's like, good Lord. But yeah, it was rampant everywhere I went. They were the only reason they didn't exist to serve the needs of the people or what the program was. They would make you think, they would try to make you believe that they really were there to help the citizens of Texas. That, their mission was, whether it was welfare and Medicaid, or whether it was workforce training, or whether it was drug and alcohol addiction or workers' comp, they would make you think that they existed to help the citizens of Texas. No, the only reason they existed was to, basically exist. As long as they had their position of power and money and pension, and their salary, all of that, they would do anything they could to keep their department up and running and funded and not sunsetted, because in Texas they have sunset laws, and these sunset laws are like every, 10 years or something like that. I forgot what the rules are now, but they would come, the whole department would come under sunset review. And if the legislature determined that service or function was no longer needed, they would close the whole agency down. And so they had to make sure that they weren't going to be sunsetted. And to do that, they had to paint this dire picture with the data. So basically that was it. They had to, it was survival.
Yes, and so every department does that.
Yes, it's rampant. Of course, if their department gets closed down, they lose their job. So it was a matter of survival. And to do that, you have data to show that, oh my God, this is a huge social problem we have here, and we must do something about it, which is tax people more and take that money and misspend it, but the agency survives. It doesn't get sunsetted because the data shows, the altered,
the lie shows.
Yeah, the altered data, the misrepresented data shows that, we need this money because it's a huge problem. And so, yeah, it was rampant. Every agency did it, and they still do today. They do it at the state level, they do it at the local level, they do it at the federal level. It's all of them. So you cannot trust statistics. No government stat should ever be believed. And they get thrown around all over the news, in the newspapers, everywhere. In the halls of Congress and the Senate, they get used everywhere. And people spout these statistics off, and every time they do, I just scratch my head and wonder, what, deep state administrator, told the computer programmer to include or exclude.
Yeah, because you would be the one behind the numbers, basically lying, or manipulating the data so it says what the politician wants.
Yeah, or the deep state administrator, either the politician or the deep state administrator. The number said exactly what they wanted it to say, but it's not. It doesn't represent reality. And so I would.
Well, it represents a portion of reality, but it's not the portion that they don't want it to represent.
Exactly. Well, it's whatever keeps them in power, whatever keeps them funded and in power and reelected. On and on and on. That's all they are. That is it. And so whenever you hear any stat on the news or any stat in the newspapers, or
just don't trust it.
No, because you have no idea
who manipulated that data to get that number.
Yes.
It's basically any statistic you see from the government is just not real.
I would argue so. You would have to get the
entire data set.
Yeah. I would have to personally, I would have to read the code that generated the number to tell you if this really is a solid number or not. It most likely not. Mm-hmm. but I would have to actually read the code. I wouldn't even trust like the fine print at the bottom, like the little asterisks. Like if you see a stat and it's got an asterisk by it, and then you look at the bottom of the page, and there's the asterisk, and it says asterisk means this was included, that was excluded. I wouldn't even trust that, because you have to go back and actually manually read the computer code that generated the number.
Yeah, the source code.
Because even the asterisks can be lies. Because I would pass off the number that I would feed these people, and I would show them the asterisk. You know, you told me to include this, you told me to exclude that.
And they didn't want to.
And then they would edit it and change it. They would edit and change that.
Yes.
And it's so even the asterisks are lies. The numbers are lies. Sometimes even the asterisks are lies. So you, unless you pick up the code and you read it yourself, you're not really ever going to know if that's a solid number. And I can guarantee you over 90% of it's BS.
Well, and that's also why they locked down the databases since, you know, your time, I imagine.
Yeah, they did also do that. My last year of employment, and this was in the private sector, which just goes to show you they even do this same stuff in the private sector. So don't think it's just a government thing. It's a private sector thing too. I work for a hospital and, you know, use the same tool, SAS and SQL, to analyze, you know, hospital data. And, you know, they did the exact same thing too. And, you know, they were unashamed of it. And also they wouldn't allow me access to the data at a high level like I was with the state of Texas. I could really access all the raw data. Once I went into the private sector, they were squandering just as much money as the state of Texas was. And it's all our health insurance premium money, by the way. And they were squandering it all too. So they knew that I had enough talent to go in there and slice and dice this data and come up with a real answer. And so they just plain didn't allow me access to the data at that level because they knew.
Yes, and also you said that since they didn't allow you access to the data and you were a data analyst, they were essentially paying you to do nothing.
Yes, I sat there for 8 hours every day for a year doing nothing because they wouldn't allow me access to the data once they figured out that I would be able to rat them out potentially. If I wanted to, I could come up with some information and leak it to the media and show how corrupt they were, wasting all of our health insurance money.
Yeah. So, and it's still somewhat involved in the government. And
sure,
so
but what's Medicare, Medicaid?
It's still governmental corruption that's going on there.
Yeah, they had federal grants, and they were just squandering the money. Squandering it, you know, gaining nothing.
Yeah, I mean, paying you to do nothing.
Yeah, paying me to do nothing.
Just to bill against the grant, so they could, you know, continue getting the grant because they needed to use that grant money for something.
Oh,
so they had to hire you to do nothing just to make it look like they were doing something, and so they could continue to get that grant.
Yeah, so they could keep their job.
Yes.
The grant was funding their job, and if the grant goes away, then they lose their job. So they have to keep that grant. So they just hired me and said, you're going to be a data analyst, but you don't have any access to the database. And I was like, okay. You know, I was getting paid $70,000 a year for that to do nothing. And
of your money, people.
Oh, yes, of your health insurance premium money. Is where that was coming from, you know. So, you know, it was just ridiculous. So it's after a year, I just got fed up when I realized I was never going to get access to the data. You know, and I chewed a bunch of people out, a bunch of people way higher up the chain than me. I told them exactly what I thought about them. I told them they were, you know, thieves. They were thieves and doing absolutely nothing to help, you know, the patients, which is what their job is to do. But
and then also people congratulated you after you had done that, right?
When I chose to quit, yeah, I did have a few people walk up, you know, in my last few days. I did have a few people walk up and go, you know, that's great. You chose to walk away instead of just take money for nothing. And I'm like, you know, you know, if you asked me to lie, I guess during my 27-year career with the state, yeah, I lied and I took money for it. But at least I was doing something. These people were asking me to do absolutely nothing and just take money so they could keep this grant and fund their position. And so I just, at a certain point, I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people would probably think that's crazy. Though it's like you're getting paid to do nothing. Why
Yeah.
did you quit?
Yeah.
But, yeah, it is kind of not honorable to do that,
Yeah, well,
especially when it's people's taxpayer money.
Yes.
It's like you're taking from people and just for nothing.
yeah, like I said, working for the state of Texas, it wasn't right, lying with the data to help, win people re-election and to help administrators keep their department open in their jobs. That kind of made me, a little sick to my stomach, but I did anyway because I have family to support. But working at the hospital, I was doing absolutely nothing but staring at a computer screen all day. So, yeah, I just couldn't do it. At the end of the day, I couldn't do it. And I saw, all they were doing is taking that grant money and giving each other raises and bonuses for not helping anyone. And so I just got sick of it and had to leave.